The broadcast arrived without warning. Across every human colony, space station, and fleet vessel, every screen flickered and went black for a fraction of a second. Then, without ceremony, the image appeared. A stark, unrelenting vista of cold, alien stone, a vast execution yard, lined with towering iron scaffolds. The sky above was a sickly shade of violet, the air thick with the low hum of alien machinery. And in the foreground, stretching beyond sight, stood row after row of shackled women, their hands bound, their faces hollow with terror. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the voice came. "This is the price of defiance." The speaker was a Zelther noble, his elongated, insectoid form wrapped in the ceremonial garb of the Galactic Empire. His voice was smooth, cultured, utterly devoid of emotion. 80,000 traitors, he continued, gesturing with an elegant, clawed hand, punished for their rebellion against the rightful rulers of this galaxy. He turned his eyeless face toward the hovering cameras. "Let this be a lesson to your kind. Submission is survival. Defiance is death." And then the killing began. The mechanical creak of levers. The sharp snap of tautened ropes. The sickening sound of bodies dropping in unison. Thousands at a time. The camera did not cut away. It lingered, capturing every moment, every gasp, every final twitch of those who had been condemned. There was no dignity in their deaths, only the grotesque efficiency of mass execution. Across human space, millions watched in horror. Families frozen in front of their screens. Soldiers gripping their weapons until their knuckles turned white. Leaders standing in stunned silence, caught between disbelief and unspeakable fury. On Earth, within the towering halls of the United Terran Federation's command center, President Helena Rains stood as if turned to stone. Her advisors murmured in horror behind her, but she heard nothing beyond the dying echoes of the broadcast. The feed had ended with a single phrase, displayed in harsh, unfeeling text across every screen. "There will be no further warnings." In the chamber of the Galactic Council, Ambassador Elias Voss slowly removed his earpiece, his fingers trembling. He had heard many things in this room, heated negotiations, empty platitudes, outright lies. But never this. The weight of it settled into his bones like lead. Across from him, seated on their ornate, hovering platforms, the various alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Some watched him with thinly veiled amusement, others with carefully maintained neutrality. Only a few showed anything resembling unease. The Zelther delegation, seated in their usual place of prominence, remained utterly impassive. The council speaker, a reptilian elder from a race that had long since chosen compliance over honor, cleared his throat. "Ambassador Voss, you have requested the floor." Voss rose slowly, his face unreadable, though his dark eyes burned with a restrained fury. He let the silence hang, let it stretch until even the most indifferent among them began to fidget. "Did you watch it?" His voice was quiet. Too quiet. The speaker shifted. "We have been made aware of the events. Did you watch it?" Voss repeated, stepping forward. His gaze swept across the assembled delegates, his voice gaining strength. "Did you see the fear in their eyes? Did you hear their screams? Or did you merely glance at the report and move on, as you've done so many times before?" A low murmur spread through the chamber. "The Galactic Empire," Voss continued, his tone sharp as a blade, "has committed an atrocity beyond words. 80,000 innocent women, slaughtered, not in battle, not as a necessity of war, but as punishment. As a message." He took another step forward. "A message meant for us. For humanity." A Zelther representative, seated upon his gilded throne-like chair, let out a slow, deliberate sigh. "Your kind has always been emotional. I suggest you compose yourself before making any rash decisions. The Empire has acted within its rights." Voss turned sharply toward him. "Its rights?" The Zelther diplomat inclined his head, his mandibles clicking. "Rebellions must be quelled. Order must be maintained. If humanity cannot govern its own outlying populations, it cannot expect the Empire to show infinite patience." Voss stared at him. For the first time, he realized something with utter clarity. These creatures did not fear human wrath. They did not believe in human wrath. That was about to change. Straightening, he addressed the entire chamber. I stand here not as a negotiator, not as a diplomat, but as a representative of my people. His voice was iron now, unyielding. And I tell you this, humanity will not forget. We will not move on. We will not debate policy or seek meaningless resolutions. We will act. The murmur in the chamber grew louder. Some of the smaller species, long subjugated under the Empire's rule, whispered to one another. Hope, perhaps, stirring beneath their fear. The Zelther diplomat chittered in amusement. Bluster and threats. You will do nothing. Voss smiled. It was not a kind smile. The Galactic Empire has long believed us weak because we have chosen peace. Because we have sought diplomacy instead of war. You have mistaken patience for cowardice. Mercy for fragility. That mistake will be your undoing. He turned, striding toward the chamber doors. Behind him, the council erupted into noise, protests, demands, warnings. He ignored them all. A message had already been sent. Across human space, military channels came alive with a single, chilling transmission. Execute Protocol Ragnarok. And with those 3 words, the war for retribution began. The council chamber was in chaos. Ambassador Elias Voss had expected resistance, but not this level of unrestrained fury. Alien diplomats shouted over one another, their voices an overlapping cacophony of outrage, disbelief, and thinly veiled fear. Some demanded immediate sanctions against humanity, accusing the Terran Federation of threatening galactic stability. Others, particularly those whose own species had suffered under the Empire's rule, watched in stunned silence, weighing their options. Voss stood motionless at the center of the storm, his expression unreadable. He had spent years in this chamber, enduring the condescension of species who saw humanity as a minor inconvenience, a young and untested race playing at diplomacy. That illusion had shattered the moment the executions aired. Now, the council was being forced to reckon with something they had long dismissed. A race capable of mercy had chosen vengeance. The speaker's gavel struck the stone pedestal 3 times, sending echoes through the vast chamber. Slowly, the noise subsided, though tension still crackled in the air. The speaker, an aging representative of the Threxian hierarchy, exhaled heavily. Ambassador Voss, do you understand the consequences of the words you have spoken? Voss turned his gaze toward the speaker, meeting his reptilian eyes without flinching. I understand them better than anyone in this room. The Zelther diplomat from earlier leaned forward, mandibles clicking. Then you know this is suicide. His voice carried the smug assurance of a species that had never known true fear. The Empire has stood unchallenged for millennia. Your kind, for all its stubbornness, cannot hope to stand against it. The Terran Federation has, what? A few fleets? A handful of contested colonies. You will be crushed before the cycle ends. Voss reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, sleek device no larger than his palm. He pressed a button, and sound filled the chamber. It was not static. It was not distortion. It was screaming. 80,000 voices, overlapping, echoing, the final moments of human women whose only crime had been existing under an empire that saw them as disposable. The sound was unrelenting, raw, unfiltered. The council chamber, for all its arrogance and posturing, could not drown it out. The Zelther diplomat's mandibles twitched. A flicker of discomfort. Voss let the recording play for another few seconds before he stopped it. Silence stretched long and cold. That, he said, voice even and measured, was the last sound they ever made. He turned his gaze slowly, sweeping over the assembled diplomats. And you expect us to beg for leniency? The speaker shifted. The Galactic Council has no authority over the Empire's internal governance. Then the Galactic Council is obsolete, Voss interrupted. Because humanity will no longer recognize the authority of a governing body that allows mass executions to go unanswered. A murmur rippled through the room. Some called for his immediate expulsion. Others looked thoughtful. The delicate balance of power that had held the galaxy in check for centuries was now teetering, and every species in the chamber could feel it. The Zelther diplomat's tone grew amused again, though something in his posture was less certain. "You speak as though you have already declared war." Voss allowed himself a small, humorless smile. "I don't need to declare war." He turned, lifting his hand. A gesture, barely more than the flick of his fingers. A signal. Across the chamber, a human officer, standing at the far edge of the assembly, tapped at a small holopad. A transmission surged across secure military channels, carrying only 3 words. "Execute Protocol Ragnarok." The Zelther diplomat's expression darkened. He understood now. The decision had already been made. Even as the council chamber erupted into new chaos, even as demands and threats filled the air, Voss calmly walked toward the exit. A few of the smaller delegations hurried after him, speaking in hushed, frantic tones, asking if there was still time to negotiate. He did not answer. Outside the chamber, in the shadowed corridors of the council spire, a figure awaited him. Admiral Catherine Rao stood with arms crossed, her military uniform immaculate, her dark eyes burning with the same quiet fury that had settled in Voss's bones. She did not ask what had transpired inside. She had known the moment she received the command. "The fleets?" he asked. "Mobilizing," Rao confirmed. "The Empire's defenses are stretched thin across multiple sectors. We hit fast, hit hard, and make sure they never recover." Voss nodded. There was no hesitation, no lingering doubt. The line had been crossed, and there would be no return. "We start with Zalvari's Prime." Rao's lips curled into something that was not quite a smile. A fine place to start. The war began with fire. Zalvari's Prime, the Empire's largest shipyard world, had orbited its dying sun for millennia, a sprawling latticework of docks and foundries suspended in the void. It had been designed to be impregnable, a fortress world where the Empire's might was forged. Now, it burned. The first wave had been surgical, long-range kinetic bombardments from stealth cruisers, puncturing orbital defenses before the defenders even knew they were under attack. The second wave was brutality incarnate. The first Terran fleet, led by Admiral Catherine Rao, descended in a coordinated strike, warships emerging from slipspace in perfect formation. Tactical AI controlled the firing solutions, but it was human intent that shaped the battle's purpose. This was not conquest. This was not negotiation. This was the systematic dismantling of an empire's backbone. The empire's defenders scrambled to respond. Frigate clusters formed desperate counterlines, firing plasma lances into the darkness, hoping to catch an enemy that had already moved. Zelther dreadnoughts, bloated with centuries of technological arrogance, turned their massive guns toward the human fleet, only to find their targeting systems scrambled by electronic warfare pulses. The Empire had prepared for many threats over its long rule. It had never prepared for this. On the bridge of the TNS Vengeance, Admiral Rao watched the destruction unfold with the quiet, clinical focus of a woman who had long since set aside the luxury of hesitation. Her officers worked in perfect synchronization, executing maneuvers that had been planned weeks in advance. Each order was given without wasted breath, each strike calculated for maximum devastation. A sensor officer called out, "Enemy flagship is attempting to retreat. Their escort line is breaking." Rao's gaze flicked to the holo display, tracking the movement of the Imperial Behemoth, a warship large enough to blot out the stars. Its engines burned hot as it tried to break away from the chaos. Cowardice, thinly veiled as tactical withdrawal. "Full pursuit," Rao ordered. "Lock railguns and fire at will." The human fleet responded with the efficiency of a predator smelling blood. Magnetic acceleration coils hummed to life, and a moment later, tungsten slugs the size of buildings tore through the void. They struck the Imperial Behemoth at a fraction of light speed, tearing into armor designed to withstand traditional plasma warfare. The Empire had built its ships to endure siege battles, slugging matches that favored slow, methodical exchanges. They had never considered that humanity might simply choose to break them. The Behemoth's shields shattered. A second volley from the Vengeance slammed through its reactor core, and for a moment, the colossal vessel flickered, an impossible, dying thing. Then it exploded, the shockwave illuminating the battlefield like a second sun. The defenders' morale collapsed. The Zelther fleet, once the proud enforcers of the Empire's will, fractured. Some captains fought to the last, bound by duty or arrogance. Others turned their ships and ran, slipping into emergency warp jumps that scattered them like frightened insects. On the ground, the battle was worse. Human Black Guard shock troops descended in drop pods, slamming into the foundry districts with the force of falling meteors. Zalvari's Prime had been a place of industry, not warfare. Its surface defenses were built to repel insurgents, not the full fury of an invading army. The resistance was desperate, but it was meaningless. A squad moved through the burning corridors of a factory complex, their armor reflecting the crimson glow of distant fires. Captain Elias March led them with practiced precision, his rifle steady, his voice a quiet anchor over the comms. Secure the control nodes. Cut their emergency signals. No survivors. No one questioned the order. In another part of the city, a Zelther governor cowered in his private bunker, surrounded by the last remnants of his honor guard. He had spent years overseeing this world, treating the laborers as expendable, basking in the unshakable knowledge that the Empire would always protect him. Now, that illusion lay in ruin. The bunker doors shuddered. Explosives, precisely placed. A moment later, the reinforced steel collapsed inward, and the Black Guard entered, weapons raised. The governor did not beg. He simply stared at them, mandibles twitching, his eyeless face unreadable. "You have made a mistake," he rasped. "The Empire will not fall so easily." One of the soldiers stepped forward, activating a hollow projector. The last moments of the executed women played in the cold light of the bunker. Their faces, their fear, their final gasps. The governor said nothing. Captain March raised his sidearm. "This isn't a war," he said softly. "This is justice." The gunshot echoed long after the bunker fell silent. By the time the battle ended, Zalvari's Prime was a graveyard. The shipyards lay in ruins, their skeletal remains drifting in orbit. The planetary foundries, once the lifeblood of the Empire's war machine, were nothing more than scorched ruins. Survivors, those few who had surrendered, were herded into containment zones to await trial. Admiral Rao stood on the bridge of the Vengeance, watching as the last of the fires dimmed. She tapped her comms link. "Status." A voice crackled through, calm and precise. "Complete operational control achieved. Zalvari's Prime is ours." She exhaled. The first of many. Far across the stars, the heart of the Empire trembled. The death of Zalvari's Prime sent shockwaves through the galaxy. For the first time in recorded history, the Galactic Empire had lost a core world. Not to a rebellion, not to political infighting, but to an enemy that had struck without hesitation and left nothing behind but ruin. Human fleets had not just won a battle, they had shattered the illusion of imperial invincibility. In the imperial capital, deep within the throne halls of Vortalis Rex, the supreme emperor of the Zelthers sat in silence. His advisors whispered frantically around him, scrambling to assemble responses, emergency decrees, counteroffensives. Yet none of them could mask the truth. Humanity had done what no species had dared before. They had declared war. And they were winning. The Emperor's voice was calm, though it cut through the chaos like a blade. "Summon the warlords. We must remind these creatures of their place." Across human space, there was no celebration. No cheers. The war had only begun. Ambassador Elias Voss stood in the war chamber of the United Terran Federation, watching a holographic projection of the battlefield reports. Red-marked systems, Imperial fleets repositioning, supply lines being severed. The retaliation was coming. The Empire had been caught off guard, but it would not remain so. President Helena Rains stood beside him, her face grim. "They won't underestimate us again." Voss nodded. "They'll escalate. Mass conscriptions. Fleet-wide mobilization. They'll burn entire worlds to make an example of us." Across the chamber, Admiral Catherine Rao leaned over the table, adjusting tactical projections. "Then we burn them first." Silence followed. Not in disagreement, but in the weight of what came next. "Zalvari's Prime was a message," Voss said. "Now, We end this before they have a chance to strike back. Rao studied the display, fingers tapping against the steel surface. We'll need full deployment of all active fleets. Hit their industrial hubs, cripple their supply chains. No drawn-out engagements. Every battle must be decisive. Rains exhaled slowly. This is more than war now. If we lose... We don't lose, Voss said simply. And there it was. The unspoken truth. The line that had been crossed. This was not about borders. Not about territory or treaties. This was about making sure no empire, no species, ever again believed that humanity could be subjugated. No one in that room harbored illusions of mercy. In the darkness of deep space, hidden beyond sensor grids, the Terran Armada assembled. A force unlike anything humanity had ever unleashed. Carriers loaded with next-generation warships. Destroyers built for speed and precision. Stealth bombers armed with payloads designed not just to kill, but to erase. And at the head of it all, the TNS Vengeance. Rao stood on the bridge, watching the fleet prepare for the next phase. One of her officers approached. "Ma'am, final battle plans are locked in." She nodded. "Good." Across the ship, across every vessel in the fleet, a final order was transmitted. No surrender. No retreat. No forgiveness. The war for humanity's vengeance had only just begun.